What's up? What's up? I'm Abe Zuka. This is the Temple of Zuka. I'd like to thank everybody for leaving comments. We're going to enter into part 10. Part 10 of Temple of Zuka. What's today's reading is the Transfiguration of the One Book. The Transfiguration of the One Book, humanization of nature, spiritualization of the body, and the Orphic voice. To say ecce homo is also to say ecce Daphne. The spirit is human, the invisible is our reflection seen through matter. Every metamorphosis ends in the human face. The final miracle is not deification but recognition. We were gods disguised as trees. Transfiguration reveals that nature was already human. Love alone makes the stone a statue. The bear becomes prince, not by force but by affection. To name is one form of touch, to love is another. Identification is metamorphosis by empathy. Magic is nothing more than matter responding to tenderness. The miracle occurs when we recognize the soul as what we feared was soulless. Love humanizes what logic petrifies. To see the tree as human is the end of philosophy and the beginning of vision. Every branch is a limb, every root a buried heart. When we know the tree as our extension, science becomes compassion. The humanization of nature is the naturalization of man. The eschaton is ecological. Spirit returns to soil. Resurrection means the forest remembering itself as body. It's the forest remembering itself as body. The final transformation is not escape from the world, but its transfiguration. The supernatural body is nature, spiritualized matter, perfected. The resurrection body is not vapor, but vegetation. It is raised, a spiritual body, a tree of flesh, a laurel of love, each leaf a tongue of resurrection. The earth rises invisibly in us. Reconciliation of eros and spirit. Sensuality fulfilled is spirituality realized. Sublimation and sexuality are not opposites but reciprocals. What we desire is never the object but its radiance. Love is the dialectic that unites symbol and flesh. Every erotic act is a rehearsal for transfiguration. Every tree is a temple column, every mountain a sleeping giant. The sacred is everywhere once the eyes are open. The world becomes scripture when we hear its silent grammar. Under every bark a heartbeat, beneath every word a pulse. Vision is revelation through recognition. To write is to carve upon bark the name of desire. Language begins in forests. Book from beach, buch from buches. Each poem is a grove of sentences. Each reader a wanderer beneath leaves. These trees shall be my book. Nature is literature incarnate. When the tree speaks, it does not. When the tree speaks, it does so. When the tree speaks, it does so through us. Poetry is the voice of vegetation dreaming in human syntax. It is all one book. Ovid and the Gospels, Petrarch and Rilke, Joyce and Jane. Authorship is an illusion of division. The word is communal. Every text is a leaf from the same tree, rewritten through centuries of wind. The canon is a forest, criticism its echo. To believe in literature is to belief. Reading is resurrection through recognition, remembering the one book within all books. The Delphic priestess and the schizophrenic girl speak the same language of transformation. The body resists divinity by becoming it. Possession and inspiration are two sides of the same flame. To be leafy speaking, to speak the world's delirium. Metamorphosis is divine pathology. The cure is to accept it. Every rapture is resistance turned revelation. All metamorphoses are chapters of one unfolding organism. From Genesis to Revelation, it is one tree growing through time. Each leaf a character, each branch a dispensation. The Word was wood, and the wood became world. We that were wood when the wide wood was, the poem is our final body. The apocalypse is the flowering of the forest. The book made leaf, the leaf made light. Book of Origins, domestic sacred, the domestic sacred and the law of the hearth. Religion as the constituent principle of the family, marriage, and inheritance. Before the temple, there was the fireplace, the hearth, the fireplace. Let's meet at the fireplace. Every family was a liturgy in miniature, a daily dialogue between flame and flesh. The first theology was not cosmology, but domestic prayer whispered over fire and food. The sacred flame was both God and ancestor, breath and inheritance. To extinguish it was apostasy, to feed it was faith. The family began as a fire kept alive. The dead lived next door. The grave was not exile, but continuity. The soul only moved a few steps. The field of the ancestors was the family's true estate. To eat, to pour milk, to burn meat. These were the acts of communion across mortality. The dead became household gods, requiring sustenance and returning protection. The early religion was not about heaven, but about keeping the dead warm. Generation alone does not create kinship, worship does. The sacred flame binds more deeply than blood. To belong is to sacrifice at the same fire. Emancipation is excommunication. Adoption is conversion. The family is the first church. The altar, its law. The gods are named for remembered ancestors. The gods are names for remembered ancestors. The Greek word for family, epistion, means literally those near the hearth, those near the fireplace. The home is not a dwelling, but a domain of invocation. Kinship is proximity to sacred fire, not proximity of blood. Domestic order is the first cosmology, the microcosm before the macrocosm. The hearth is axis mundi, the world's pilot light. The family is the galaxy organized around its flame. Marriage is a rite of passage between two fires. The daughter must abandon one god to join another. She ceases to be her father's priestess to become her husband's. The husband, too, risks sacrilege to share his household god with a stranger. Their union is not sexual, but sacerdotal, the communion of two cults into one liturgy. To marry is to change one's mythology. Every sacred marriage unfolded in 3 acts: separation, procession, and communion. The daughter's sacrifice detaches her from her first altar. The procession dramatizes the perilous crossing between gods. The new bride is carried across the threshold because her feet have not yet been consecrated. The final act, the sharing of the sacred cake, seals the couple's covenant with the fire. The God witness, not affection, but transmission. One cannot worship two fireplaces. To invoke two lines of ancestors is spiritual adultery. Thus, the wife must die to her first family and be reborn as daughter of her husband. The polygamy is cosmological heresy. Two fires cannot burn in one house. The religious marriage is therefore monogamous and indissoluble. Divorce is unmaking the altar, a ritual unbinding before the same flame that joined. The family must not die, for a God's death means a God forgotten. Extinction of lineage is extinction of worship, a cosmic crime. Celibacy is impiety, childlessness is damnation. Each son is born to feed the flame, to nourish the dead with its offerings. Each generation is a link in the liturgical chain between ashes and the unborn. Religion is metabolism of inheritance. The ancient magistrate's first duty was not to legislate, but to ensure that no earth went dark. Family law was a theology of reproduction. To die without a son was to consign one's ancestors to hunger. The first obligation of life was not pleasure, but perpetuation. Marriage without fertility was a broken covenant. Divorce from sterility was sacramental correction. The barren line threatened the cosmic with entropy. The barren line threatened the cosmos with entropy. Birth alone did not make one human. Initiation into fire did. On the 9th day of the fathers presented the child to the hearth. Circumambulation around the flame purified the infant and introduced him to the ancestors. The ceremony baptized the soul into continuity. The child became citizen of two realms, the living and the dead. The name given was the spark and the word by which the ancestors could summon. They could summon him forever. The family is ontology in practice, being as relation, relation as ritual. The house mirrors the universe, father as sun, mother as earth, sun as spark. To maintain order at home is to sustain the cosmos. Theology begins in the kitchen. The polis is the network of hearths. Civic order as distributed fire. Civilization is the multiplication of altars without the loss of origin. The recurso of fire and flesh. The sacred fire of the ancients is the same flame that burns in memory and in art. The hearth becomes the page, libation becomes language. Writing is the new ritual of remembrance, the modern funeral feast. Each book is a hearth for the dead. To read is to tend the ancestors' flame. Thus, recurso itself is a new domestic religion, an archive built of sacred fires. Narcissus and the self-other. The human infant lives first in a world without duality, where pleasure and reality, self and world are one in the same breast. In that primal scene, there is no object to be desired because the world itself is self. Pleasure is immanent to being. Narcissus is not yet a figure of vanity, but of unity. The self reflects in the mirror of the world a finding no boundary between reflection and flesh. Love begins not as acquisition, but as remembrance of the undivided condition. The pleasure ego before the fall into the reality principle. Eros is not invention, but recovery. A movement of return towards the undifferentiated bliss in which object libido and ego libido cannot be distinguished. The self does not discover the other, it rediscovers itself in the other. Every object choice is a refinding, the self recognizing in the world as a lost image of its own plenitude. The other is the mirror in which narcissist becomes real. Without reflection, the self would dissolve into abstraction. To love is to see oneself magnified and altered in the mirror of another body. The transference of ego into the world of flesh. Possession is the corruption of reflection when the mirror is taken for the thing. Eros collapses into hunger. Distinction becomes identification. Object choice is itself a symptom of divided age, the metaphysical illness of dualism. Identification and possession are two faces of one movement. Incorporation, the desire to become one with the world. Love seeks incorporation, not conquest. It is the dissolution of boundaries in the act of embrace. The primal aim of Eros is unification, a fusion of pleasure and being, self and world, hunger and love. Love thy neighbor as thyself is not a moral commandment, but an ontological description. There is no neighbor without the self that loves. The ego is only a residue, a shrunken version of the once cosmic ego that embraced the universe. In dreams, mysticism, and erotic union, that original magnitude reappears. The ego remembers its lost circumference. Limitless narcissism is the unconscious aim of the psyche, not self-worship, but self-expansion until the world is again the self. The child's love at the breast, Spinoza's Amor Dei Intellectualis, and the poet's rapture are one movement, the self delighting in its own being as world. To love the world as oneself is the end of both theology and psychology. Eros, corrected by Spinoza, must overflow. It is not containment, but fountain. Exuberance is the body's theology, the self made radiant by its own overflowing energy. Narcissist does not drown in self-love. He becomes water and so discovers the unity of image and source. Eros overcomes the distinction between within and without by sheer abundance. What was mere becomes current. The erotic act, rightly understood, is not self-absorption, but world creation. The self's outward flowering into form, voice, and light. The primal scene at the breast was preambulant. Love without hate, satisfaction without aggression. Civilization begins when the fusion fractures, when biting enters into sucking, when the mouth learns division. To heal is to remember. The reconciliation of Eros and Thanatos, work and play, economy and love. Pessimism dissolves before the possibility of post-ambivalent fusion, a psychic and a social return to unity without regression. The eschaton of psychoanalysis is not death but reintegration, the reawakening of the pre-ambivalent body as cosmic consciousness. The Madonna and child are not symbols of dependence but the cosmic unity. The archetype of Eros is fusion, pleasure, and nourishment. Every religion begins in the mouth, in the first communion between infant and mother. The Eucharist reenacts the primal incorporation, the world consumed and the self made divine through digestion. The erotic, the theological, and the infantile converge in the point of nourishment. Theology is the milk of memory. Thus the psychoanalytic telos coincide with the mystical one, to abolish dualism, to reunite self and world, to live again in the radiant mirror of the all.